Zen. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me over. Thank you, Nathan, to organize this. Yeah, so today I'm going to be giving a talk about chatbots and basically show you how to make one with some fairly new technologies for me personally, because I come from a mobile background. I've never really done any PHP, so this was like the first kind of PHP that I've ever written. So it might not be the best. But yeah, anyway, so the first thing when I hear the word chatbot is like it's not chatbots when I hear like the word chatbot. So have a second or two to think about what comes to your mind when you hear this word, because when I first thought about it, I'm like, it's going to be a robot, it's going to be talking. And that's not really what chatbots are. Okay, the second thing I think about when I hear the word chatbot is, as a 90s kid, I would remember this. Yeah, there's some AI that's going to kill us or make us into batteries. But that's not really chatbots, right? And the chatbots that we're going to be talking about are going to be fairly more mundane and a little bit simpler. So yeah, I work for Pusher. We make real-time communication APIs. You may have heard about us. So who's doing Laravel here? A lot of people, more than half, I would say. Yeah, so we're one of the options for Laravel, putting Laravel real-time into Laravel with Laravel Echo. That's our channels product. That's our original product. It's like enables pops up over WebSockets. And the objective is to essentially bring real-time communication features to all apps. We have offices in London and SF, and yeah, we have clients everywhere, pretty much. If you want to talk more about that, I'm going to be here for a couple of hours afterwards. So if you want to chat about what we do, let's do it. So yeah, today we're going to be talking about a couple of things. First off, we're going to define what the bots are. And secondly, going from history, like we're actually not going from the antiquity, we're going from slightly more recent history to modern days, how bots have developed and for what use cases. And then we're going to talk about the other part of chatbots, which is chat, like why you should care about chat in apps nowadays. And then we're going to move on to a more practical example. So like essentially dissect one chatbot and look at it from an anatomical perspective, what it actually is made of. And then we're going to build one. And that's going to be this talk. So yeah, what are bots? Or so obviously bot is short for robot. And again, my sci-fi imagination brings me something like this when I think about robots. So these are C-3PO and R2-D2 from Star Wars. If you don't know them, they're fairly kind of cinematized version of robots. So they talk, they move autonomously. They are nice comedic sidekicks to the rest of the film. But realistically, that's not the robots that we have as humans on the planet right now. More or less, the robots are like these things, working in factories, assembling things that we all use and love every day. So this is a picture of an assembly line for a car manufacturing plant. And yeah, but essentially, the concept is the same. Robot is just one computer that's interacting with something in the physical world. Whether that's walking, talking C-3PO or something that assembles your vehicle or sits on your in your living room to hoover it. that's essentially it. One computer driving some hardware to interact with the physical world. And what are chatbots then? So again, my sci-fi mind comes into full effect. I think about the Avengers and Tony Stark. He had this. If you watched any Iron Man films, he had this bot AI thing called Jarvis that he communicated with that basically let him fly this Iron Man suit. And that's not really a thing. Most chat bots or AI bots that we are comfortable with or like familiar with come in these two forms. So either Alexa or Google Home. You can talk to them in natural language. So Google, hey Google, what's going to be? It's actually triggered. Hey Google, what's the weather going to be like in Newcastle this morning? That's why I asked it. Yeah, that's like closer to what we have. Even closer, if you use Slack, you should be familiar with this little fella. That's Slackbot. That's easy to program, simple little bot that's built into Slack that you can make do anything like from reminders to witty responses to things. And yeah, so that's closer to the bots that we're talking about. But essentially, to sum up a bot, it's essentially just a computer or a program that interacts with humans over a chat interface, as opposed to like an API or a UI application. Chatbot has a specific chat interface, and that's the bots we're going to be focusing on. Moving on from history, you're probably familiar with this person. It's Alan Turing. He's coming on the 50-pound note that no one's probably ever going to see because no one carries 50-pound notes around. But essentially, he came up with this this thing called Turing test, which is a way for you to a test for a computer to see whether a computer will pass the test if the human that it's speaking to thinks that the human is speaking to another human. So it needs to fool that computer needs to fool the human to think that the computer is human. And yeah, that's like a long time ago. He devised that in 1950s. In 1950, there was no bots at that time. There was like computers were about as big as this room or even building probably. And the first actual kind of chat interface came in the form of ELIZA. That was like a clever academic project where they wanted to simulate kind of real human interaction. So essentially, you were talking about, hey, I'm Zen, I do this, and it would essentially give you a question like, tell me about your job, because it figured out that in your sentence you mentioned what you're working on. More interestingly, in '95 we got Alice, which was like the first real attempt as natural language processing. That was pretty cool, and it even had like plugins for, it was open source, had plugins for like bots, and people could add their own functionality to it. And then fast forward, 2010 Siri was released, so like all of those smart assistant, smart AI things. And 2013 we got Slack and Slack bots, and chat bots are really like everywhere from now. So yeah, that's kind of where we are, how we got here. But yeah, now we talked about bots, but let's talk about chat apps in particular. So every phone you have, like you probably have, what, 5 or 6 messaging apps installed. Facebook has 3, the last time I checked. Google has probably coming towards 70. And yeah, but not only dedicated chat apps have chat like WhatsApp or Messenger, but you also have chat in Instagram, which is like a social media. YouTube has the live video chat. So there is definitely more and more apps that have chat, and combine that with the other ways of communication that we have, like things like voicemail, telephone, text messaging, snail mail. There is definitely a lot of ways that kind of businesses and companies can want us to communicate with one another. I have a colleague, Jim Fisher, who wrote a blog post, like a rant blog post about how he hates telephones, and that was like a first item on Hacker News for like a day. That's how many upvotes it got, because a lot of people apparently in the tech world hate telephones. But yeah, because there are so many ways of communication and everyone has their own preferences, that's why all of the app makers, they decide, hey, we're just gonna make chat and put it into our apps. So that if you've noticed, if you're buying something on like Gumtree, if you're using a bank, it probably has a chat. Gumtree will have a chat between merchant and or seller and buyer. And if you order food online with like Deliveroo, or if you order a cab, there is going to be a way to contact the driver or the delivery driver. And that's because there are so many ways for us to communicate, so that all the apps decide, hey, let's build chat ourselves. And realistically, you don't have 2 or 3 chat apps in your pocket, you have 20, because every app is a chat app. Yeah, that's why we built ChatKit. That's our new product called ChatKit. It's a chat API for web and mobile, so developer friendly. You want to build chat feature into your app, ChatKit can power it. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel for everything that you're building. And it just comes with everything that you need. So like message history, attachment, push notifications, and bot integrations for all that. So yeah, that's kind of the basics covered. Now let's look at chat bots and apps in more practice. So if we try and disassemble one, what we'll see. Each chat has a couple of concepts, like some of them has more, some of them have less. So users are the first one. You want to chat, you want a human to be on at least one of the sides. There might be one user, there might be 2 users, there might be different tiers of users, either like peer-to-peer, like let's say players of the same game in the same room chatting together, or it's like a business support person with a customer. Doesn't really matter as long as there's users. There's chat rooms or conversations, so where those users are able to communicate or chat with each other. And lastly, messages. So in those conversations, they need to be sending some stuff around. So that's why we have messages. Again, they can be text, they can be multimedia. Doesn't really matter. That's something that's really common to all of the chat features, chat apps, and there is a lot of other things as well. So like attachments and voice, video, and smart add-ons to it. So yeah, now that we've discovered what a chat app or a feature contains, let's look at what a bot should contain. So a bot plugs into your chat app. It usually triggers on some kind of event. Let's say a message is received. What happens? That's your thing to figure out. So you receive a message, you got to process it. Every bot will do that in some way. And lastly, you want to send the response. And yeah, that's essentially all there is to a chatbot. I put an owl in there. If you've seen a joke about how to draw an owl, first you draw 2 circles, and then you draw the rest of the owl. Yeah, so the process message, that's the one that's actually up to you to figure out. And obviously, because messages are they're only often just a part of a conversation, maybe your bot might want to manage some state across those messages to kind of figure out whether one message is related to the previous message. But it's not necessary. A bot can be just the first three, and that's it. Looking at some examples, this is Slack. It's the basic way of doing Slack bots. So you detect a message that's tagging the office bot here and respond to something. And response is another message. They've added some more fancier integrations for Slack, but that's essentially how it used to be for a very long time. And Slack was super easy to build your bots on it as well. So we had one for our infrastructure team. So they had a chat ops bot called Marvin that basically let us track our Kubernetes deployments, figure out who did the deployment when something blew up, for instance, or like better to kind of triage different issues, especially when they were like in really rapid development mode. Next up, you got things like Intercom. So it's like a drop messenger bubble for support usually, or for marketing. And yeah, that like doesn't really need like a programming interface. You can just drag and drop different boxes together. So like, and it comes with like buttons for a user interface. So like looking to buy essentially one button that you ask a person a question, what brings you here today, looking to buy, or I have a question. They just click that. So they don't even need to follow the same kind of textual interface. That's also a bot, and it's completely different from Slack. And lastly, there's the AI aspect of everything. So that's something you can do with like Watson or Dialogflow, or I think Azure has something similar. So that's like adding machine learning to your conversations to kind of so that the computer can infer what your human's intention was. So you can say book a flight, or I want to go from somewhere to somewhere else, and Dialogflow or that kind of AI will find the concepts that the user is asking about. So like what the gist of the conversation is, and any kind of parameters like amount or destinations in a flight booking example. And like these are all optional. Like as long as you've got trigger messages, processing messages, and a way to send responses, that's a bot. But like you can do much more. So yeah, now we've disassembled one. Let's now go and assemble one. And the way we'll do this is using serverless and do it in PHP. Has anyone done PHP with serverless? Good, great. I'll show you something new then. So yeah, why serverless for chatbots? You don't have to manage any infrastructure. For someone who's never done any PHP like myself, this is quite valuable. Secondly, messages, they may come and go in different cadences. There might be a lot of input at some point and very little input on another point. So serverless functions will essentially vary on, that should be an A, but it's an E, sorry, on demand. So you just don't have to deal with scaling or actual machinery. So it's great for just that. So like if you want to handle some webhooks or events from the chat, then serverless, you can invoke like a serverless function that you don't have to manage, and it's just going to work. But yeah, if we're only talking about functions like Lambda, they're not very ideal for handling state, because a Lambda, once it's invoked, it's forgotten about. So we need to plug in a different service to handle things like state or session, or to track a conversation across several messages. So yeah, that's our chatbots, why we can use serverless. Is anyone not familiar with serverless? Okay, I'll do a quick introduction. So you know how there used to be servers, so like you had to deploy your code on a physical machine, or you had to, like later then you had like cloud computing like AWS. You could just like rent a virtual machine at Amazon. And then we moved on to things like Heroku that lets you deploy and write entire applications like Rails or Laravel that could just like run really easily the entire application and manage all of that for you. And serverless is like one step further from that. It's like just one single function that you deploy, and it's all managed for you. If no one invokes that function for like, I don't know, an hour, it's gonna be destroyed. So next time it's invoked, it's gonna take, I don't know, a few seconds more. But once it's up and running, it's actually running this in a, like hiding all of that management, infrastructure management for you, but you know that's just gonna work. And if 100 people at the same time invoke the same function, it's always gonna, like, it's automatically gonna be deployed. Amazon was first with it, so they did Amazon Lambda, AWS Lambda, but now Azure and IBM and all of the other providers have similar tools for it. Serverless in PHP, that should be interesting. It is possible. There is something that got released quite recently. It's called Bref Framework, and it works with AWS Lambda. I've not tried that. I want to do that because I discovered that I can use ZiteNow. ZiteNow is another kind of serverless provider that just lets you deploy anything with just like a one now command. You literally just type now and it works, and it's magic. There's no particular reason. The way PHP is done, it's suboptimal. I'll show you why, but it's possible. That's enough for me. So yeah, we're not building Jarvis. We're not building a Slack bot, but we're building something that will allow a human to communicate over ChatKit with a bot, and the bot can respond to it. So, demo time. Okay, let me switch the screen. Okay, so that's ChatKit, and I have an application running that's essentially a demo application that I have for ChatKit, that I have for different use cases. You can join me in this room because it's going to be more fun if several people join me by scanning this QR code. I sure hope this works. There is like a little login screen that that lets you log in via Google or GitHub, I believe, and or even just come up with your own username and password. Doesn't really matter. And once you're in, we can start chatting. So I can start typing like, oh, Martin Bean has joined. So that's another bot that I've already created. So let's do this. So there's a few people joined already. That's great. I can see you in the top right corner. That's like our presence feature for ChatKit. And yeah, you can do emojis, you can do attachments. One password is confused, I guess. But yeah, that's the app that we'll be adding a bot feature to. So this is another bot. Yeah, as I mentioned, sorry. I broke something. Great. Let me log in again. Yeah, this is another app that I've created that basically just greets everyone. And the way it does is we have a set of webhooks set up in ChatKit, and one is like that responds to messages, and one is that greets users when they join a room. And if we look at the code, it's really just one PHP script that is going to be deployed to Zeit now. In it, like we have a composer file that basically let me communicate with ChatKit, and a JSON file that lets now know how to build it. I'll show you how it's actually doing it in a second. And yeah, this server that we have, is going to send us messages, and we need to do something to be able to deploy it. So ChatKit requires an instance locator and a secret key to function. That's our PHP SDK for ChatKit. All the requests are going to be coming through here. So we need to check whether the method is post, and we actually have some body content so that you don't have to process empty things, empty bodies. And once we receive a webhook with a code that's object, and immediately respond with a status 200. That's a really cool thing with PHP. I can send a response status before actually continuing the process, because it's just a script. That was like, what the hell is going on? But I found it super useful, because the ChatKit's webhooks, if you don't answer them in 3 seconds, it will count as failed and just keep retrying, which is not what you want in this case. And now we can actually decode the payload of the message. And we have a couple of matchers for what the bot can do. So tell me a joke, roll the dice, or flip a coin, or just not know anything what it can do. And in each of those messages that just matches the text part of the message, we're essentially just calling send message to ChatKit to the same room that the message had. So yeah, that's what we have.
What determines what it actually knows? If you said, tell me a joke, would it be able to find a joke?
So, originally I wanted to have a separate API that did jokes, yeah. But it's my first PHP script. So I hard-coded it, so I actually have a function called return me a random joke. And that's like it's got like 4 or 5 jokes in there. If anyone has a suggestion for a new joke, let me know. We can add this in. But yeah, the coin flip essentially just does a random, and dice essentially also does a random. Yeah, so we need to copy our ChatKit credentials over from the application. ChatKit has a couple of different types of credentials. One is instance locator, which lets you locate your instance where it's running, and then it's the key, which lets us do things like administration task and authentication. And this is a server SDK for PHP, so that's what it's going to use. Now that we have that, I've already authenticated with Zeit now. I can just do command now, and it's going to deploy this. First upload the code, and then run this builder script to build it. And what it's actually doing here, this particular script, it's embedding the debug server for PHP, so that in every single request we're going to invoke a debug server for PHP, which is why it's running a bit slower than we want. But that's the cost of running something as crazy as serverless PHP. So that's great. We have our script running in here. And let me just make sure that it's the same URL. Send.now.sh. Yeah, it should be. So we can go now back to ChatKit. Ha! And it's working. So, in Zeit, this is what their dashboard looks like. You have all of your apps that are, I think this is nice and visible, all of your apps that are running. And yeah, that's our script. You got some logs, and you can inspect the sources as well. And because we don't have anything on index.html, it just shows us our scripts that we have. So like all of the scripts that we have, like on message, coin flip, and dice and jokes are in here. And if anyone makes a request to any of those scripts, they're just going to execute. Which is not ideal, but for the sake of a demo, it's going to work. So yeah, that's very simple, easy to make demo. Has anyone written any jokes in here? No. I'm just gonna put Martin's copy in there and add something to it. So let's do another. Recruit people, and we're gonna send another message to it. And text is gonna be not that. Text is gonna be this. So we've added another bot command, and let's do now. I hope this works. That would be cool. But yeah, essentially, what we have done is deployed another webhook handler using now. Which lets us handle things in this little bot. Summary. We've shown you Chatbot for ChatKit. Yeah, we're handling webhooks. There is different types of ways of handling bots or like incoming messages in different things. So like some of them, like Twitter, I think has a streaming API. It's not directly as a bot thing, but it has a streaming API that you can intercept and then react on it. We have some space age joke telling logic, and it's a serverless application that's written in Zeit. Zan, this is how you get in touch with me. Let's see if our thing is deployed now. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so that's me. I'll upload the slides in a bit. Thank you.